Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Global Adventure Show with travel writer Debbie Stone. All right, so we are going to Rome today with travel writer Debbie Stone, who we call the Fire Monkey from her trip to Bhutan. So that's a whole reason why we call her Fire Monkey. But she got into a little bit of fire actually in Rome because she learned how to cook with an Italian cooking class done through The Tour Guide, which you can go and learn more. Go to thetourguide.com and her article, and you can see the photos are. All of that is linked in the episode notes. You can also go to bigblendmedia.com, look under Debbie in the expert department, or go to the food section. You'll see it there as well. And there's a nice search box there. But I'm excited about this because I think when you go places and you travel, there's food tours, which Debbie loves, we love as well. But taking a cooking class, you really actually start to really appreciate the food of a region even more. Is that right, Debbie? Welcome back. How are you?
Well, thank you. I am doing fine and happy to be speaking to you about this cooking class. You know, I preface by saying I'm really not a cook. I mean, I can cook, but I'm not somebody who, loves to be in the kitchen and who's very creative and knows how to use all the various gadgets. So, cooking classes are always an interesting thing for me because I always feel like I'm going to be maybe like a klutz in the class, or I'm going to be the one that the instructor spends the most time with trying to correct my mistakes. And so anyway, but it's like kind of like I love pasta. I love Italian cuisine. And, you're in Rome. It's like, as I said, do as the Romans do. And it kind of is like, okay, let me see how pasta is made. How is tiramisu made? How are these things really made from the start?
Ravioli, my favorite.
Yes, and ravioli, because, I certainly don't do any of this from scratch. I'm going to buy the noodles. I'm going to go to my Italian restaurant down the street. And so, I wanted to see, I had heard that this was quite the process from people who have done it before. But I thought, this will be kind of a fun experience. Plus, I do like cooking classes only because I really, really love to eat the results.
And then you're doing the process, and really it's a class, so they can't get mad at you because you're an adult.
No.
It's not school, but you did this in France. You went to Paris and learned how to make croissants, which
yes.
that to me is really intimidating. But then making dough, and this was a dough to dessert, a 3-in-1 cooking class. So what was the second thing? I know there's dough, dessert. There's a
well, it was fettuccine and ravioli, and it was, tiramisu. And so there are 3 things that you're making in this 3-hour session. And it takes place in a professional kitchen, and everybody has like their own workstation, but you're, at a big long table, and you'll get on your apron and, wash your hands, roll up your sleeves. And, our instructor, Tommy, who was doing the class, he was great. He was very funny, also very clear and concise in his directions, and he was very helpful and didn't make people feel embarrassed at all. And we started with the dessert because it has to chill. The tiramisu has to chill for a couple hours before you can eat it. And I learned that tiramisu really literally means pick me up because, the dish contains coffee. So, that's where you can kind of get your caffeine. Yeah, so it's a pick me up. So, it really just it just has, an egg, some mascarpone cheese, the sugar, espresso or coffee, and some lady fingers, and the topping is the unsweetened cocoa powder. It's a little bit of a process, but it's not that overwhelming. And I thought it was really fun when you dip the lady fingers into the espresso and you soak them, and then you layer in the tiramisu in the small glass, and then you dust it with the cocoa powder, which I really got into. And I think I got carried away because mine was nearly an inch thick at the top there.
Well, then somebody likes her cocoa. But I like that you guys started with dessert first. That makes sense to me.
Well, because, the cooking process, if it has to chill for a while, you can't eat it. And, the idea is to eat your meal at the end of it, so everything has to be ready. But the next thing was the pasta making skills. That's, there's no machines. Now, there are pasta making machines out there, but this was this is homemade pasta. So
you didn't do the rolling machine?
No, you've got a rolling pin. You've got your knife, your fork, and a nice flat surface, and then you've got your, flour, and you've got your egg and some salt, and you go to work with it. And Tommy would demonstrate all the steps, one step at a time. Making the dough, you rolled the dough, you cut it into different pieces, and you had to knead the dough, and it was really it really took a lot of muscle.
Do they give you wine?
God, no, because you have to concentrate and focus.
Oh my God. No, I want wine when I'm doing this. I'm sorry, but if you're kneading dough, I don't care how dirty my wine glass gets because it's my hands that are dirty. But if I'm doing all this, I require wine.
Well, your reward is to get the wine at the end. So, it's like you focus. You can take out your aggression on the dough. You slam it down with a lot of vigor, and you do it until he walks around how he walks around, and he looks at everything, and he tells you do this a little more, do that, or I'll help you fix this or whatever. So then you roll the dough, and that's definitely not my forte because it either tears apart because it's too thin or it's too thick. But anyway, he really showed us a couple of clues or hints to how to get it to sprinkle some flour on this, do this, so that you don't get it stuck and sticky, and but it really is something that can be done. And I felt pretty good after I did it because I was like, oh, I actually did this, and my dough didn't fall apart, And
I want to go back to your dough making because he did teach you some tricks, and one is that I didn't realize that there's a flour called 00 flour.
Yes, and that's the standard. It's a gold standard for fresh pasta as well as for if you make a Neapolitan style pizza, So
and then I always thought you put eggs in, and you don't need to.
And you don't have to, And it's nice to know if someone is allergic to eggs, you don't really need an egg to make the dough, so you can use water instead. Which is so those are some kinds of things that I didn't know, and somebody would probably really appreciate knowing if they don't, if they're allergic to eggs or different products like that. But so you can keep it very simple with just the water, and the flour, but it has to be the right kind of flour. So then, you cut the different sections of the dough, and you put aside certain sections for making the ravioli after that. And, the cool part is when you cut the pieces, and then you take your flat part of your knife and you slide it under the pieces, and you lift it up in one movement. You flip your knife, and the dough comes down like in a curtain of noodles. It was just, oh my gosh, it was so cool.
Gosh, that's cool. So you get that. So you made fettuccine noodles and ravioli from the same dough,
right? And you set aside the other part of the dough, and that one, you put the dollops of the ricotta filling in it, and you space it out. To prevent the raviolis from exploding, you kind of make indentations for the pockets and pinch them together, which kind of releases the air so it doesn't explode. Because I've made like store-bought ravioli, like the ones where you like get from the freezer, and sometimes it's just like they explode in the hot water. Anyway, this
everything explodes in the kitchen with me.
Yeah. Yes, I can totally relate. And we didn't actually cook the pasta because the staff did that in another part of the kitchen, but Tommy said to us, how long do you think you need to cook this pasta? And I'm thinking, I'm thinking of when I buy pasta to cook, usually like, 8-10 minutes or whatever it is. And the magic number here is only 2 minutes because it is
fresh,
homemade, fresh pasta. So, and then we had choices of some sauces for the pasta, and there was like a tomato sauce with pork. There was the cacio e pepe, which is like Parmesan and pecorino and pepper. And then there was like a regular tomato basil type of sauce. And then we, went to a long table outdoors on the patio, and the waitstaff brought us our fruits of our labor, and we toasted with wine, and later they gave us some limoncello for our tiramisu.
And how did it all taste?
Very, very, very good. But people have asked me, so are you going to be making pasta when you get home? And I'm like, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, I did my work.
I think you know.
Well, I have a friend who does this, who makes pasta. She's Mama Gizzy. She's Italian. She's out in southern Florida, and she makes fresh pasta for restaurants and things. And Nancy and I had the opportunity a few years ago to go and taste her food, and there is absolute difference between fresh pasta and the dried and reconstituted pastas. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And, I think if you taste it, if somebody gave you a taste test and here was like some, like store-bought pasta and then here is this really fresh, handmade pasta. I think if you tasted both of them, you'd be able to say, oh my gosh, there is a big difference here. And, it's made, they make it with the labor of love to make this pasta. It's a process and it takes time, it takes skill and all that the kinds of things that I don't necessarily have in the kitchen. But that's why I will, always try to go to a wonderful Italian restaurant where they do make their own pasta and it's fresh. But so it was a fun experience though, because it really gave me a greater appreciation for what it takes to make that pasta. That was the fun about it. The people that we were with were, well, first of all, they're from all over the world.
Nice.
Parts of Europe, they were North American, they were all over the place. And so it really was fun. And nobody really, he asked if, how many people really made pasta before. And I think one or two people maybe raised their hand and said that they had helped somebody or, stood by somebody in a kitchen. But no, everybody was new to this, and it was fun because, you felt good because it didn't matter if you were didn't really know what you were doing or how to do it, because everybody was learning at the same time. And you had a wonderful instructor to make you not feel bad about not knowing how to do something, because the purpose is for you to learn something. If you knew about it, you probably wouldn't be taking the class, Absolutely. And, it was just I think it was just a fun class. Everybody was happy to be there. They're travelers. They're there because they want to be there, and so it's a good experience all around. Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Big Blend Radio's Global Adventures Show with travel writer Debbie Stone. Debbie is here every fourth Tuesday. You can keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.